I love the Yakuza games, but I think most could agree that it's not a series known for its grand sweeping changes between installments. Rather, each game could be said to iterate upon a well-established formula. And so, with the relatively recent slew of new titles and remakes being thrown across the pond by series creator Toshihiro Nagoshi and his team, it can seem difficult to say much of note about each individual release other than, it's another great story, the buff men still rip their shirts off. I can only imagine that this mindset was partly what drove the developers to use last year's, or more accurately 2016's Yakuza 6 to conclude the narrative arc of series icon Kiryu in order that they could move on to new IP. Technically, however, and perhaps ironically, 6 proved to be something of a new beginning for the franchise, with a move to the Dragon Engine representing the biggest shake-up, both mechanically and graphically, the series had perhaps yet seen. Faces looked borderline photorealistic, Kamurocho looked so good it felt like you could reach out and touch it. In a series known for heavily segmenting exploration and combat, the fighting system was dramatically pared down in a way that served to emphasise the weight of every impact, making encounters feel like an organic part of the world rather than a regimented, instanced event. Besides the technical leap in itself though, 6 not only acted as an opportunity to kick the tires on the new engine with a franchise they know before moving on to Judgment, but it also brought up the possibility of polishing those older titles from older generations of hardware to make them more accessible to a new audience, potentially setting the franchise off on a whole new course beyond its supposed conclusion. Which brings us to Kiwami 2, a remake of the 2006 PS2 release, recently ported to PC, which, on the surface, and compared to the massive leap seen between Yakuza 0 and 6, kind of feels like another game in the Dragon Engine, and it would be easy to leave it at that. It plays a lot like 6, with some seemingly minor changes here and there. It's still a great story, held perhaps one of the definitive Yakuza stories, given that 2 is where a lot of the series' identity as we know it really came to fruition. You know, the buff dudes still rip their shirts off. And it's cool that a new audience can experience that story without having to dust off their old console. But there's more to it than that, and it's all rooted in those supposedly insignificant changes, causing a ripple effect throughout every aspect of Kiwami 2's design. If the gradual changes found in the pre-Dragon Engine games focused on polishing the series' individual systems to a mirror sheen, the iterations found between 6 and Kiwami 2 see the developers attempting to further blur the lines between those systems, continuing down the road of immersing players as much as possible, trying to get them thinking of Yakuza less as a video game with a bunch of technical seams on show, and more as a story that players get to live out, an authentic snapshot of Japanese culture seen through the lens of its wild criminal underworld. And the aspect in which this new, gradual shift is most acutely felt is in the game's combat. On the surface, it's basically 6 all over again. The fighting system is as relentlessly satisfying as it was then. Every punch still feels like a goddamn sledgehammer. The real-time encounters you stumbled into return, turning any object you might come across in the world of Kamurocho into a potential weapon, with things like throwing bodies into windows that break, lending your attacks a sense of weight that extends beyond the immediate fight, in turn making the world feel like more than just a map in a video game. Again, so far so Song of Life, but what Kiwami 2 does is reintroduce or repurpose certain features that were stripped away for 6. Heat actions that were downplayed in favour of moments you'd create yourself make a comeback, still allowing for 6's extreme heat mode, but also giving you a longer list of moves to pick from. In a broader sense, 6's XP-based progression system is back again, giving you more control over how you want to build your own version of Kiryu. It's bolstered, however, by the fact that drinks purchased from vending machines are no longer consumed immediately, meaning you can utilise their benefits, such as XP gains, as and when it suits you. And perhaps most importantly, you can store weapons picked up in fights again, meaning you'll likely never enter an encounter without several different options to choose from. At every stage, you're given the choice here. More so than in 6, you get to play Kiryu in whatever way makes you feel more connected with his character. The way you play, the way mechanics are framed, are a key part of characterization in games, and this was maybe most clearly evidenced to me in one of Kiwami 2's subtler moments, retrieving a butcher's knife gained through combat for a chef in one of the game's ever-charming sub-stories. Again, this may seem like nothing, but think of it this way. For so long in the series, weapons had been that and that alone, tools with which characters could gloriously tear through their enemies. But here, thanks to something as simple as the reintroduction of storing weapons and a more careful consideration on the part of the developers to make their game feel less segmented, it opens up the potential for items to be thematically repurposed down the line. It was a genuinely weird moment when I stumbled across it, triggering the thought of, oh wait, I have one of them, but that's not what they're used for here, right? Suddenly a weapon isn't just a tool of violence anymore, it's potentially a key you can use to connect with other characters and unlock new stories. It's a means of helping people, And honestly, if there's a simpler, more effective way of representing the thematic core of Kiryu's character through gameplay, I don't know what it is. You see, one thing that was brought into stark focus while playing through Kiwami 2 was the fact that, well, Kiryu is the Japanese John Wick. Not only does the game's intro establish the same "I got out but they pulled me back in" style plot, Kiryu displays many of the same socially awkward superhero traits. Somehow a master of everything, but with the seeming inability to avoid getting in way over his head every single time. Whether that be falling deeper into a revenge-fueled conspiracy spanning multiple countries and decades, or being ambushed in the street and pressured into voicing an erotic video game. And, as has always been the case in this series, his sense of duty forces him to approach each with equal vigour. Just as easily as he's able to use his fists to bring down ungodly amounts of enemies while escaping a Yakuza ambush, he's able to use them to essentially debate a Speedo-clad photographer who just got you to pose as a maid as to the true nature of art by slamming him through a table. And I mean it when I say just as easily too. Both scenarios require the same mechanical input from the player, so the gameplay is able to more effectively sell us on the fact that fighting and helping people are one and the same for Kiryu, so long as he's always reacting to aggressors and aiding the downtrodden. And it's through this lens that Kiwami 2 is able to show why the game it's remaking was the point at which this series really grew into its own thing. Despite its plot bombarding players with more crazy twists and turns in a 10-minute period than most thrillers do in their entire runtime, all of it is tied back to those surprisingly intimate but universally understood themes of love, personal growth, and the meaning of family beyond the biological. It's all further testament to the fact that despite Yakuza remaining one of the most explosive and flamboyant series out there, with the technical enhancements afforded by the remake amping it all up to 11, what sets it apart from mere bombast is the surprising nuance the game embraces in almost every situation. When a downtrodden Daigo tells Kiryu, "You never changed, you always try and punch your problems away," it's funny. It's a celebration of that joy unique to games, the ability to pulverize everyone standing in your way, but it also stands as a pointed critique of Kiryu as a person, because, you know, Daigo ain't exactly wrong. And as every game, every encounter serves to remind Kiryu, no matter how noble he attempts to be, somehow it will always come back to hurting people. But as explored through the game's 16 chapters, and numerous sub-stories that are as heartfelt as they are wacky, it's why Kiryu is punching his problems that's important. He fights so the citizens of Kamurocho can maintain order in the face of all this chaos. 2 to this day remains one of the most effective explorations of this side of Kiryu's character, and to see it playing out in the fidelity and frame rate afforded by the Dragon Engine on PC is an absolute treat. But back when they announced Kiwami 2 was releasing after the supposed conclusion to the series, it got me thinking. The more the team looks to bring those old games to a newly interested Western audience, and the further we move from the PS2 games, how much can the remake treatment really add to these titles? At what point will we start to hit diminishing returns as we head into the PS3 era? Well, as it turns out, this is precisely the reason that re-releases of 3, 4, and 5 will be just that, remasters rather than full-blown Kiwami-style remakes. But after playing through Kiwami 2, I can't help but think that that's a shame. From a preservationist standpoint, I can certainly appreciate the value of presenting those titles in their original form, but what the Dragon Engine offers clearly goes beyond mere graphical fidelity. It's not just sanding down those old edges, it comes with its own brand of weirdness, the kind where you're able to snap a motorbike in half by running into it, or you're entering an otherwise inconspicuous hallway that's coincidentally littered with weapons. But quirkiness has always been a part of the Yakuza brand, it's just being emphasised here in new and different ways. While these Kiwami remakes are telling older stories, they might as well be different games, and crucially, seemingly no matter what changes are made, they're able to maintain the series' unique identity in the process. So I hope you enjoyed my review of Yakuza Kiwami 2. If you did and would like to support my work directly, you can always head to my Patreon like these wonderful folks currently on screen. Your support is absolutely what allows me to put in the time necessary to make these videos, and I cannot thank you enough for that. Special thanks go to Mark B. Writing, Rob, Nico Blakely, Sivas, Artyom Vitsyuk, Hibi Amori, Dallas Keaton, William Fielder, my dad, Ali Al-Muhanna, Timothy Jones, Spike Jones, The Nameless Guy, Chris Wright, Ham Megas, Zach Casserly, Samuel Pickens, Shardfire, Anna Pimentel, Jesse Ryan, Brandon Robinson, Justin's Holderness, Matthew Natry, Nicholas Ross, and Charlie Yang. And with that, this has been another episode of Writing on Games. Thank you very much for watching, and I will see you next time.